Hi everybody, we're going to continue to work on draping a flared skirt. You should have prepped your fabric. Your fabric should look like this. I think this is about 22 inches long and it's half the width of your bolt of fabric. So if you have a 45-inch wide piece of bolt of fabric, just cut it in half because you're going to need a lot more fabric to create the drape, because to drape it we drop it down. And you want to go from your top edge down about 5 inches and mark just a line. Do not take this line all the way across. This is the waist in the center front, but your waist will not be a straight line because as we drape the fabric down to add the flare, the waistline is going to wind up curving upward like this. So do not draw this line all the way across. It's just a little short, like 1 inch line. And then you're marking your crosswise grain at the hip line. So whether you're working in full scale or half scale, you'll have to measure from your waistline to your hip. That line you drop all the way across the fabric because we're going to use it to determine how much flare we're adding, and that line will match the back when you drop the back so that you have the same amount of flare and the same grain line in the front and the back. So prep your fabric, and then what we would do first is pin our fabric to the dress form at the waist and at that hip line in the center. And you're just going to kind of spread it this way. And for just a few minutes while you're working, you're going to just pin it temporarily at that hip line so that we can smooth the fabric up at the waist. Sometimes I even stick a pin over here on the side towards the back to hold the fabric out of my way. And then what we're going to do is take a small amount of fabric away at the center front of the waist, maybe just like 1 inch, and start to clip down in so that we can release some of this fabric, because we're going to be dropping this down to create the flare. So then what we want to do is we just want to kind of like hold the fabric over here and sort of like brush it towards the side. And you'll see that some of it starts to go downward. And we're going to have to cut away some of this fabric. So I'm just going to kind of go up at an angle because I don't want to take away too much until I've determined that waistline. And so I'm just going to tack it here. And I'm going to cut another couple of clips here at the waistline so that I can smooth that and drop it out. And you're going to see, we'll pull these pins out here, and we want to create the waistline first, but we want to pay attention to how much flare we're adding to our skirt. And so I'm going to just bring this down a little bit, and you can see that I'm starting to get a ripple here and a little ripple on the side. And that's where the flare comes from, in dropping all of this. So I'm going to continue to smooth this a little bit. I don't want a lot of fabric rippling up here, so I'm not dropping it so much that I get a line here. And you're going to come around and you're going to mark the waistline. So we're pinning it at the waist. And I'm going to continue to remove some fabric at that waistline. And clipping down into it. Remember, we have to release this because it's a curve, and your top of your seam is wider than the bottom. So I want to make sure this is really secure. And you can see that it's dropped a little bit. We've taken out the pins that are holding this line. So remember, this would be up here if this was a straight skirt, and we're allowing it to drop down. And basically you want to see maybe like 2 sort of little lines in the draping. And we don't want to push a lot into the hip, so we're trying to just push it over so that we get some flare, but not we're not making like a full skirt. And so at that point, I'm dropping my waist a little bit. Maybe I cut this a little short. And then I'm going to start to come down and drape my side seam. And I'm pushing some of that flare into the skirt. So you can see that actually what winds up happening is, I need a tape measure. My hip line has dropped from the original position of the hip right here. On my full scale, it's down about 4 inches. So that's adding the flare to the skirt without adding too much. And so just continue down and pin your side seam. And then you can mark the side seam and you can cut some of the fabric off. So I'm going to, here's my side seam. Let me mark it first. So I'm going to mark my waist. So here's my waist. I'm coming around. Whoops, it's up here. And then here's the corner. You want to really make sure you define that corner so that you know how high up the waist is and when it takes that turn into the side seam. And then I'm just going to trace my side seam so I can see it's there. I can feel it. Sometimes if you have a pencil that you can turn on its side, you can actually rub that line. And I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom. And I'm going to remove some of this fabric so I don't have quite so much fabric on the side. So, let's see if I can do it from the other side. So cut off some of that fabric. Leave your, an inch or a half inch for your side seam. So let's make sure this is pinned really well because we're going to drape the back. And then once we've draped the back, we're going to do the hem. So my back piece of fabric is the same as my front. It's marked 5 inches down from the top of the fabric at full scale and 7 inches down from that for the hip. So we pretty much do the same thing. I'm going to pin it at the waist. I'm going to pin it at the hip. Oops. My pins don't seem to want to stick into this dress form very well. It's so old and dried out. Okay. So again, we're coming across at the waist, trying to determine that waistline. And you can actually just even pin at the princess seam if you want to get that waistline. And I'm going to remove some of this fabric. Oh shoot, this table wiggles. I'm sorry for the jiggliness of this. Trying to set up a place to video where I don't have too much light glare. The right furniture has been a nightmare. All right, so we're going to clip down at the waist. And continue to come around. But we're going to drop that waist a little bit. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this piece and you look for the line underneath from the back. And we're going to take this as we drop it down. And we want those to cross each other, not at the cut edge of the fabric, but right at that side seam. So I know that I've got exactly the same grain line as I had in the front. And so then you can continue, whoops, I'll just pin them together right to the form. And then we can smooth the waist out and finish draping that waist all the way to the side. So in order to do that, I need to cut again some clips into that waistline. There we go. So I'm going to pin it next to the side seam. Sometimes the pins underneath get in the way. And we're going to come down. And do the same thing where we remove some of the fabric going down the side so that you can draft your side seam. Okay. So that looks good. So I'm going to take a marker and mark the waistline in the back. Come around. And then I'm squaring it up here at the waist. So my front and back will match up really nicely at the waist. My side seams, I can see my marker through the fabric, so I can see where my side seam should be. There we go. And then it's always a good idea to have a couple notches. So I'm going to put a notch here at the hip, like a double one. And I'm going to flip this back and put it on the front. So I know that that's where that should come together. And you can actually use this line that was your grain line as a notch. Okay. So then what I would do is take it off, trim it up, pin the side seams together, and then let's put it on to do our hem. So here's our flare skirt drape, and it's pinned together so we can see that it fits pretty good at the waist and to the center back. Let me just hike that up there. You might want to have a few pins going around the waist to keep it at the waist. You don't want it to dip down on you because then your hem will be crooked. So let me put maybe one on each side of the princess line in the front and the back, just so that it doesn't move on me. You cannot use a straight line across the fabric because, as you can see, this is dipping down, so now we need to even out the hem. And another thing that you want to do is when you make your pattern, don't forget to mark your where your zipper is going to go. Generally, zippers are in the back of a skirt are about 7 inches long. So I'm going to mark this 7 inches down. And that's where I'm going to have a notch for the zipper. So if you have a full dress form that has the cage, a lot of times you can use these lines on the cage for marking your hem. This skirt is a little shorter than one of the cross marks here. And you can mark your bottom of your dress form if you wanted, and then measure down. Or you can take a yardstick on the floor and measure up. So I don't really want my skirt to be any shorter than right here. So I'm holding this tape measure, or I mean yardstick up, and it's on the number 15, which is 33 inches off the floor. And I'm going to go around and I'm going to mark that 33-inch mark. Now, you can't move the fabric like this. You've got to make sure you just let the fabric hang and tuck the ruler up towards the fabric and then mark that mark. Yeah, it's not this one here. And just keep turning your dress form and marking where that hem is going to be. So I'm marking at the 33. And then when you go to transfer it to paper, you're going to notice that you have a curve, that the hem should curve. So I'm going to go all the way around and make a few marks. I don't think you have to over mark it, because what happens when you do have too many marks, it seems to kind of go up and down, and then you're trying to figure out where did I really want that. So I'm going to mark this as, maybe 4 or 5 inches apart. Sometimes with skirts like this, you have to fold up the hem and have the wearer try it on, and then look to see if the hem looks even. So I'm going to mark that hem, and I'm going to cut it off and put it back on here so that you can see that the hem is straight. So I hope you can see that, when I rotate my skirt, my hem is really even. It should not be shorter or longer on the sides than it is at the center front and the center back. So go ahead and make your pattern and then sew a sample so that we can see how the skirt really looks once you've got all these lovely little ripples in it.